Hi, I'm Tina Glassnick. Welcome to Roadmap to Publishing. I'm happy to join you today. Let me tell you a little bit about myself so you understand why you should even listen to me. I'm a USA Today bestselling author, and I enjoy nothing more than to help other authors find a way to make their dreams a reality. For me, this includes helping you to find your audience, create your platform, but also figure out who you are for your branding purposes. So, journey with me as we do this short webinar, and you hopefully will pick up some great tips and tricks on what you can do to grow your platform and continue on your publishing path. Now, when we think about actually writing a book and becoming a published author, there are definitely many paths that we can take to become an author. Some of us choose the traditional route where we actually query different agents and then hope to find a publishing deal or sign a publishing deal. Those are known as your traditional authors. The other path, of course, would be the indie author. And this is the independent author where everything is put on you to actually then do to make sure that your product, your book is up to snuff. Of course, there's also the hybrid author, which is a combination of both being traditional and published indie. So it's a combination of the two. Today, we're going from the point that you wish to become an indie author. Although the tips and tricks later on in this guide will help also traditional authors find their place and footing. So we're going from the position that you have created your first draft. This is where you've, for lack of a better word, vomited up on the page and created a story. The first draft, though, is not your finished product. Instead, now is time for you to enter what we like to call the editing phase. Editing is very important for your book. The goal is to bring a polished product to the market and not just have something then on the shelf. The first draft is just for you to make sure that you are able to get words on the page. When you enter the editing phase, that is when you take your words and you put them into a beautiful form. So think about it as in you've created this or caught this beautiful fish. Now it's time to prep the fish. Or now it's time to, you've put up the tree. Now it's time to decorate the tree. And so that's what we do pretty much in the editing phase, where we're going to actually go through the book and make sure that you have a cohesive story, make sure that you don't have the typos or the grammatical errors and things of that nature. And that moves us then to the editing phase. Although many people like to think that editing is not something that is needed, there are four different levels of editing that is required for a book before it hits the shelf. So, the first one is, of course, the developmental editing. Developmental editing is we're looking at your structure. So this is if we're looking at the tree, if we're thinking about it as a Christmas tree, we're looking at the structure of the tree. Do we have all the branches and everything pulled out? We're thinking about the old plastic trees, of course, but do we have all the branches pulled out nicely? We're trying to make sure that the structure is there. Do we have the expected plot points, a beginning, a middle, and an end? Do we have a character arc as well? So those are the things that you're looking at in the developmental part of it. We want to make sure that our story that we wish to tell is cohesive. The next part, of course, that we're thinking of would be line editing. Line editing takes things a little bit niche down, and this is when we're looking at sentence structure, your grammar, your tone. We're trying to make sure that things are making sense and readers are not tripping over words, or the meaning that you have in or intend in that text is not being stumbled over. So your line editor will then make sure that your sentence structure, your grammar and tone are consistent and cohesive. And so there's no huge shockers that come out through your text of something that you might not have even intended for your text to include. The third thing to look at would be copy editing. So, copy editing, of course, we're niching down a little bit more. And this one then looks at grammar, punctuation, spelling. So, this is the one of the final areas that we're looking at to ensure that we're catching and making sure there are no grammatical mistakes, that you don't have extra commas that are no longer needed, that spelling has been corrected. And just to let you know, spelling is constantly changing. So even if you're using the Merriam-Webster dictionary, for instance, you might have one spelling that is today, and 5 years from now, it might be something different. So just keep that in mind too, that spelling does constantly change. And our last thing that we like to do would be proofreading. Proofreading is of course important because we want to make sure that for our final check that we have as close as a perfect book as possible. Now, something to think about here is that there are no perfect books. There will always be mistakes in your books, but you want to make sure that your book is as perfect as you can get it. Yes, you will even find errors in traditionally published books. So, an extra proofread will definitely be helpful. However, please note that a proofreader is not an editor. So, you want to make sure that you're actually going through the proper stages and getting those edits done. So, something else to also think about and consider would be hiring someone different for the developmental editing and the line editing. Because the more often that someone reads a text, the more likely it is that their brain will automatically correct a text to what they think it should be. And so errors are likely then to slip through. So, one way of not having that happen is to have a different line editor and copy editor. Make sure when you're hiring your editor that you know which type of editor you're actually hiring and that they are aware of what they should be doing for your manuscript. Not all editors are the same and provide the same type of work. So just because someone says that they are an editor, you need to then vet them and figure out what type of editing they can provide for you and how that will make your book then more polished. One thing that should definitely take place while you're in the editing phase and you're reading through your book again, because yes, you still need to continue to read through your book so you can catch things too and accept those changes that your editor is making. So, this is what I like to call editing phase two or editing part two. So, while you're reading your book, I want you to then create marketing hooks. So, while you're going through the editing process, you're marking down and copying over any of those story hooks that seem to hit you right in the gut, things that cause an emotional reaction, um, excerpts that jump out, that showcase your writing and the character development, anything that hits the tropes or the genre expectations for your story. You want things that really are emotional and not necessarily sexual. You want things that are gripping. Put those to the side because you will need those hooks then later during your marketing. Another aspect that you should be doing during your editing phase is creating or updating your character Bible. We call it a character Bible because it will include all the details for our characters, including their outward appearance, their background information, any kind of setting information, as well as the character's goal, motivations, and conflicts. These motivations and conflicts do change over the lifetime of a character, but it's good to actually know that if they're appearing in book one, what their goal, motivation, conflict, GMC, are for the plot, but also internally. So, how they are viewing the world and how that might change over time. So, the third thing that we want to also check on would be our tropes in our genre. So every fiction book has a trope that they are then using. A trope just helps readers to identify what the expectations are for a particular story. A genre is, of course, the classification of that book. So if you have a romance novel that is a contemporary romance and it is a second chance romance, then you're going to look at that trope and be like, okay, second chance romance is my trope. So, where in my marketing hooks am I talking about the emotion of that second chance romance? Keeping track of that information and examples of that will be helpful when it comes later on for marketing. The fourth thing that we should be doing in our editing phase too would be blurb writing. Blurb writing, some consider it to be even more difficult than writing the actual book. So, a blurb is not a synopsis. A blurb is not there to tell you the ending of the book. The blurb is there to entice. So, in that blurb, you want to set up the expectations. You want to make sure you're leaving room for the trope as well, but you also want to showcase the stakes of that story. Why do you think people should read your story? What is the reason that people should spend time with you in your world? This is where blurb writing becomes very important. I suggest that you write one and then you keep writing. So basically, I like to create like 5 different copies or 5 different blurbs and do a comparison and see which one has the hooks that are appealing to me, which ones feel punchy, which ones show those stakes. Of course, as a fantasy writer, I'm trying to also showcase the world and entice people to enter my world. Writing the book is sometimes one of the easier things for us to do. But as with all things when it comes to selling, we also need to know who our target audience is. With this in mind, I would invite you to do some digging. When it comes to genre, it is important to know who your target demographic is. Everyone is not your target audience. You need to niche down to find out who your perfect reader is. This information will help you, of course, also with marketing. The information you're looking for will include gender, age, location, but also where do they hang out on social media? Knowing where your target audience actually hangs out on social media will tell you where you need to hang out on social media so that you can actually reach them with information about your book. Sometimes, if especially if we're writing more like YA books, who we're going to target is not necessarily who's reading the books. So, for young adults or middle grade, we're not then targeting the actual audience. We're targeting those who are actually the buyers. And that would be libraries, for instance, parents, for instance, even schools, because we know that they are the ones who are purchasing the book. That is not to say that you still won't have mass purchases independently, but remember, you have to choose a target audience and not just everyone. So niche down to find out who your ideal reader would be. And if it ends up being someone who is under the age of 18, then you're going to actually need to look at how those youth actually would receive their books, who actually would buy their books, how are they getting their books. And if they are then getting them through school libraries or the library system, then you're going to have to figure out a way to reach that audience through different means. So the avenue for reaching librarians, for instance, is going to be different than reaching a college, collegiate, or college student who's 22. Um, the librarians, of course, they have discernment on which books they actually are able to get into their libraries. So that is a totally different step than if you are actually trying to sell on Amazon. Later on, securing recognized reviews like in Publishers Weekly or the Library Journal can assist you in also getting libraries to have your book in stock and also having distributors who work with distributing books to libraries. However, for this training, we're actually focusing on the broad aspect of building your platform for the retail market and not for the library system. So, now that we've talked about the target audience, the next thing that I like to look at is building a platform. Even while you're still editing your book, you should be building your platform. Your platform is basically going to be where you're saying, hey, this is me. And the fun thing about that is that you're able then to not only showcase your book, but also your authentic self. So you're building up your brand and the promises of what it means to or for a reader to read your book. So what is the promise that you then stand for? What kind of reading experience are you promising them? And then leaning into that with your branding. As you build your brand, you're also going to be building your presence on different social media sites. As I've previously recommended, you want to have a profile on the site where your audience hangs out. If you are writing books where your audience is Gen Z, then you need to hang out on TikTok. If you are looking for readers who are more interested in um, photos and book quotes, Instagram might be a great one. Uh, Check out the demographic information for the different site that you wish to actually um, join. One thing that I would also recommend is that even if you do not plan to be active on that site, make sure to claim your author name. That way, should things change, you can always get back on there and start building up that platform with followers. So, as you're engaging with your audience and you're posting information that is um, coherent with your brand and your book, you also want to engage with your audience. So, for this, you're going to respond to comments, you're going to like other people's posts, you're going to um, really become a part of that community that you're actually trying to build and hopefully have people see you in. So, when we're talking about engagement, we're talking about the difference between engagement and call to action. Okay. So, engagement, we're trying to build a relationship. A call to action, we're trying to get people to do something for us. So, for engagement purposes, we are looking at people liking a post, sharing a post, commenting on a post, things of that nature. And when someone comments, we then want to respond. If someone likes our post, invite them then to follow us. We want to actually build engagement. And so, with that, we want those things that we're posting to actually then speak to those things that we wish for people to understand as being a part of our ecosystem. So, for instance, if you are a fantasy author, one thing that you can do is you can do a slideshow. And on that slideshow, you can have excerpts from what we were talking about, that editing from a prior um, snippet or screen. And taking that slideshow, you can share that. And that actually helps to build content. That's one option. You can also just take a simple Canva background, post a quote on it, and post it on Instagram or even here on Facebook. The great thing about content creation to create engagement is that the only thing that is required is for you to be authentic in how you present yourself to your audience. So, for instance, if you are writing a clean romance, do not post steamy snippets on your Facebook. That message is then not cohesive to what it is you're trying to do. Okay. So when we're doing thinking about engagement, I like to think of engagement versus the call to action. So when we're trying to build relationship, you just don't go out and say, "Hi, my name is Tina, and I want you to do this for me." No, you're saying, "Hey, my name is Tina, and these are things that I like. Do you like them too?" Or, "Oh, I just found this dragon out in the wild. What kind of dragon do you think it was?" You're building engagement and trying to start conversation. And so later on, say you have um, finally your excerpt done and you want people to join your newsletter, that's when you have that call to action where you're saying, hey, join my list. This is what we've been talking about with all the dragons. Join my newsletter. And you'll be first to know what's happening or why the dragons are so important or the history of the dragons, or maybe there's a bestiary that you've actually created or behind the scenes that you've actually done that will engage with your audience even more to get them warmer to you and your messaging. So for this, I like to recommend that 80% of your post should be engagement and 20% of that should then be call to action, where you're asking your audience to do something, be it to join your newsletter, to follow you, or later on, once you have sales, then to buy your book. But we don't want to do necessarily just a buy our book, right? So this is what we're talking about with our polished sample. So you've gone through the editing process. We have a polished sample that we want to present as content. And so you've gone ahead and you've chosen those different samples to include for social media, for instance. And you're getting people to join your newsletter because of that. So join my newsletter and be the first to read this amazing sample, this amazing excerpt from Beauty and the Beast Part 2. So what you're going to do then is that you want to try to test your sample and your copy. And one way of doing that is to use different copy when posting about your sample. So maybe for the first one, we're talking about fairy tale retellings because you're very much into fairy tale retellings, and that's what this is. And so you focus then on that for your messaging. Fairy tale retelling. What if Beauty and the Beast happened, but this time she winded up with Gaston? Okay. So we're testing that and we're going to see how our audience actually responds. So then we can actually do a different one. And maybe this time we're talking about enemies to lovers, but also still with Beauty and the Beast. So you can go with what if this enemies to lovers story hit hard when um, Belle is forced to become engaged to Gaston to save her father and she hates him or something like that. So you're dealing with the enemies to lovers on how that could be. And you test that and see which one actually converts better for engagement. Do you get more likes for the first one versus the second one? Do you get more comments? Those metrics you actually want to pay attention to. So, while you're actually then doing this with the polished sample, there's a third thing that you should also be doing, and that is looking for your comp authors or your comparable authors. Basically, although our books might be virtually, we still need to know where they might fit on a shelf. So we want to know who are our comparable authors and where on the shelf we might fit. Okay. So you're then going to go to Amazon and you're going to go to your genre first and foremost. From your genre, you're then going to niche down to your subgenre. From your subgenre, you're then going to niche down to your actual niche. And then I want you to start looking at the books in that section for your niche. I want you to look at their blurbs, their reviews. What are readers loving? What are they hating? I want you to study them. Then those 5 authors who you actually think are great matches for you, you're going to learn as much as you can about that particular book. Create a spreadsheet which includes then your keywords, your tropes, and any commonalities that you have. And then I want you to also read the samples. Is their voice close to yours or does it have like the same humor or tone or pacing? Anything that actually helps you figure out, yes, my book would belong next to them in this actual niche. one thing to keep in mind is that we're not trying to copy anyone's branding or we're not trying to copy anyone's voice. You have your own individual voice. However, what we do want to do is find out where you fit in the market. And so you have to know through reading where you fit. As an author, we still have to read other books, not only to understand the market, but also to understand where we fit in the market. Now, once you have that information, when you are creating your sample, you can then say, okay, well, this is Fourth Wing meets Hunger Games, for example. And having that comp or that comparable helps readers understand the expectations of what they might be getting for a story. So that information would be something that you might put in a caption for TikTok or even in as a hashtag. I'd say more of a caption though. So once you have your comparables, you're now, and you have that pretty sample and you've tested, you're going to give that sample away. And that sample, you would, of course, then create a book funnel account or story origin account, and you set that all up so that you can actually capture email addresses to create your newsletter. The purpose of the newsletter is that you will then have direct route of communication with your ideal readers. One thing you can also do, should you not wish to then head to Amazon, is that you can also head to your local bookstore and look at the shelves. Look physically at the shelves and see where you think that you might belong. I personally think that Amazon is a better avenue of doing this because you can actually quickly look at the information and say, yes, this is where my book would be versus I'm not for sure this book is categorized correctly. Not only that, but by going to Amazon, you're able to look at the reviews. You can also look at the reviews on Goodreads and library things, of course, or even NetGalley if you're looking for how librarians, for instance, are um, reacting and engaging with the book. But the main thing is that we want to make sure that we're finding out where we belong. So take those notes, read those samples, and analyze to see where you might actually belong. So now we're into our channels of marketing. So we're looking at three distinct channels. I like to think of them as social media, email marketing, and then paid advertising. So everything costs something. Either it's going to cost money or it's going to cost time. With social media, the gate of entry is pretty open. All that is required is for you to have a social media account and to engage with people. While you are engaging, you are building relationship. You're building and creating avenues for trust. People buy from those that they know and trust. And so being authentic on social media without purchasing, I'm sorry, without putting forth the continued buy me post actually helps you build an engaged audience that is warm to you and your books. The warmer people are to you and your messaging, then the more that they can actually get into your sales funnel. So before they can get into your sales funnel, the first thing they have to do is become aware of you. And so social media is very helpful in that. Once they're aware of you, they can then get to know you better and get deeper into your funnel. And that's where email marketing is very helpful. So when you're able to actually post those call to actions on social media and have readers actually follow you and subscribe to your newsletter, you're actually then able to market to them in a totally different way, in a long form way as well, that helps to continue to build out that relationship and hopefully then leads to them becoming a super fan. That is our ultimate goal. So engagement, 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 authentic engagement. The third route, of course, is paid advertising. Paid advertising is a tricky situation and should only be done if you have the money for it, for one, And if that book that you're trying to sell actually is leading to something else. If you have one book, paid advertising, without actually having another product for it to go to, could leave you in the red. And that's not something that you want to do. So, paid advertising is definitely good when you have higher priced items, like a special edition. That definitely is then worthwhile. But if you're selling a 99-cent book, how many sales do you need to actually gain that $20 back? Is that feasible? That is something to consider. So, if you're doing Kindle Unlimited, how many reads do you need to actually earn back that money or those monies? So, keep that in mind when you're coming to paid advertisement. You want that goal to be fulfilled. What is the paid advertising then leading to? Is it leading actually to them joining you somewhere else down your funnel? Is it just to just to get awareness and you're okay with the lower ROI? Those are things to think about. Remember, this is just an introductory lesson on the things that we cover in more in depth in my coaching. I do hope that you understand that for paid advertising, for any advertising, there has to be a goal that you're actually trying to reach. And so if it's just about sales, you could be missing out on the long term as well. So now let's move on to branding. So we love to think about branding as being the colors and the typography and the fonts that we all use. That's only a part of it. There are 5 different things you should keep in mind when it comes to branding. The one thing I love to focus on first with branding is your promise to your readers. So your promise is basically what your readers can expect from you about your book, about your writing style, about how they should embrace your world. This includes then the tone and the theme. That's why it's often suggested that if you're writing clean romance on one hand and then horror on another, graphic horror, then you probably want to separate those brands because they are not cohesive. But it will be different maybe if you are writing clean romance and cozy mystery. The second part of your brand is going to be your visuals, as in how things look, what kind of color palette you have, the typography, the imagery. If you're doing romance, do you have lips or flowers? If you're doing fantasy, is there some kind of creature or dragon, beast? Is there magic? Is there a witch's hat for fantasy? Think of those things. Is there a magnifying glass, a cup of tea? Those kind of things actually help with imagery when it comes to building out the visuals for your branding purposes. The third thing that I like to really hone in on is the beauty of being authentic. There's only one you, no one can ever be just you. And so readers love to engage with authors as themselves. They want to know more about the authors, but also not only through their social media, but also in their writing. So, how they actually communicate. Maybe you write very poetically. Maybe your paragraphs are very tense and very gripping. Maybe there's a lot of emotion that's spread through there. Your voice is very unique to you, and being authentic to that is very important for building your brand. And that includes then staying on messaging and making sure that your messaging then aligns with where you stand. So, if you're writing, for instance, about serial killers, it'll be very difficult to then start talking about roses on your or flowers on your social media. That is not on brand. That is very juxtaposed to your branding of it being cohesive. We want to make sure that everything is consistent, and consistency is the fifth prong of that author brand, so that everything that you're saying and that you're doing and that you're posting supports the promise of the brand that you're creating. One thing that I like to tell authors to do when they're creating their brand is to look at other people, research the genre specific design trends, see what you might actually like and what resonates with you, and is still authentic to your voice and to your branding, what it is that you actually wish to accomplish with your brand, and leave room for your brand to also grow and change. One person that I love to look at is Neil Gaiman. Neil Gaiman, of course, he does not stick to one genre. He is a multi genre author. But his tone, you can always tell his branding by his tone, is also very gothic in feel. So think of that when you're thinking of how you want your brand to be and how that brand supports the promise to your readers. Okay, so now we're on to promotions. Before we get to promotions, I do want to say this. Once you actually have your book ready to go, um, and you've already placed it up for pre order on Amazon, that is a great time once you have that polished edition to start getting ARCs. ARCs are advanced reader copies. This is when you are giving away your book in exchange for a review. There are different sites that actually help you with that, from NetGalley, which is super expensive, to Booksprout, to even Story Origin. Of course, you can also start your own ARC team by using those people that you discovered through social media. So that is also helping you so that you're once you launch, you're launching with knowing that reviews are coming pretty quickly. So you're not just launching into a void. Having ARC readers and an ARC team are very important and a step that should not be missed. Okay, so now let's go on to promotions. So for promotions, we're talking about online promotions, content marketing promotions, community engagement promos, paid advertising, special offers, and partnerships. So there are several different ways that you can start promoting yourself, and some will cost something and the others will be free, of course. So you have giveaways that you're able to participate in, and these are usually multi-author giveaways where a service provider actually sets this up for a, and it's genre specific. Genre specific, ooh, or where it is actually then set up for you as well. Usually, this involves having a big giveaway that is created using different books of from very popular authors, or creating like a giveaway bag, or even that Amazon gift cards or things of that nature. The idea there is that readers are signing up to enter for a chance to win this huge prize, and all of the authors who participate are then given the email addresses for those who participate in the giveaway. The downside of this is that you'll have people who are participating just to get the giveaway and not necessarily are interested in your book. So the leads that you get will need to be warmed up and convinced that your book is worthwhile. Something that's great is, of course, then the free sample or the excerpt. And this is when you are giving away an excerpt of your book in exchange for their email address. This can be done, of course, through lead ads on Facebook, should you wish to do that. Remember, with ads, of course, that make sure that you have the money to spend for that. You do not need to go into the red for this, but you're looking for readers who are interested in reading your free sample excerpt. Make sure, of course, that your excerpt is punchy, engaging, and that it inspires that emotion where readers will want more from you. This is very important and should not be overlooked. So you're looking for curiosity, conflicts. Another fun thing that you can do, of course, would be in person events. This is when you're actually able to stand across the table, look your potential reader in the eye, and gab. It's when you're able to showcase to them why they should give your book a chance. So come up with a punchy line of something that you can say to draw readers in. I also like to actually have a bowl or candy or something on the table that I can give out to people, and that draws people to the table too. Another thing that we always do for promotions will be multi-author collaborations. Can be with anthologies, but it can also be with round robins. And that's basically when you're sharing their book in your newsletter, and they are sharing your book in their newsletter. There are so many different ways that you can collaborate with other authors who are just like you. Of course, when collaborating, make sure that you are collaborating with those of the same genre. That is very important. Of course, when it comes to sales, we're looking at limited time limited time discounts. Unfortunately, limited time discounts, although they might be really good for increasing KU reads, and they can also be good for if it's a first in a series, you have to have something that's actually going to follow it up so that people are not just having that one book to read and not leading somewhere else in your funnel. So, the idea with a limited time discount, you have to figure out what your actual end goal is for that. That's very important. And of course, when you're doing promotion, there's also different times of the year that you can look at and actually promote your work, be it a holiday, be it a special event, be it a holiday or a birthday for you. The main thing is that you're looking at different times that you can actually then showcase your work as an author. The final thing I want to talk about would be understanding metrics. I've always been told that you can't know what you're growing if you're not tracking. So you need to track the results of everything that you're doing. This means tracking your conversion. This is a key indicator of how things are performing for you. So, how are people responding? Are you getting signups for your newsletter? Are you getting followers and subscribers on your social media? How is your time and effort being rewarded? That's what you want to look at for your conversion. For your ROI, we're looking at the rate of return of investment. And so for this, we want to make sure that you're staying in the positive. If you're spending $5, we want to make sure that you're making $5 or more, because a negative ROI can affect you long term, meaning that you should not have to go into debt to become a successful author. So if you decide to do that, that is absolutely up to you. The reasoning is that an ROI can be something that is not earned right away. So, for instance, you can say, well, I'm going to advertise and I'm going to get a book bub, for instance, okay? And for that book bub, I'm going to reduce the price of my book to free. Okay, so we're going to say you have a free book bub. The goal then is to get those people into your funnel. You then have to make sure that your book has a call to action at the end that converts for your goal. So your ROI is about your return of investment. But if your conversion is based on a totally different goal, such as increasing your subscribers, the important part of knowing would be how much is each of those subscribers potentially worth when they go through my funnel. Those are things to consider when you're looking at your metrics. Of course, when you're doing brand awareness is you're keeping track of your audience and how you're growing. How is your brand growing? How is your audience growing? So keeping track of those metrics will also be very useful when you're creating your actual author platform. We all start at zero when we're building our platforms and when we're creating something beautiful. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes energy, it takes focus. This is not something that you're able to necessarily do overnight. However, with continued engagement, authenticity, and building up your online platforms, building your newsletter, and making your product the best that it can, your book, and drawing on those tropes and everything that goes with pushing to make the audience understand why they should spend time with you, what they gain from spending time in your world. Maybe they'll fall in love and find a new book boyfriend. Maybe it will just be a great adventure that they're able to travel on and be heroic where they're unable to be heroic in their normal everyday life. Maybe it's to teach them something so that the mistakes that you've made they won't make. Maybe it's for to heal the heartbroken. Maybe it's to show that love conquers all. There's so much power in being an author and expressing ourselves through our stories and our words. And it is up to us to make sure that everything is as polished as we can get it so that we can actually help entertain our wonderful readers. So I want to thank you for actually joining me, as I hope you've been able to get some great nuggets in this webinar. I put this together because I wanted to make sure that there was at least a basic understanding of what you can do from first draft to publication in your building your platform. Of course, we did not go into how do I upload my books? How do I get all the different ARC readers? What's the process of that? Do I need a PA? There's so much more to this, but I just wanted to give you a taste because I know that this can help you tremendously. I've been asked a lot about coaching, and I want to let you know that you can now sign up for coaching. I want to help you give you that personalized guidance so that we can develop a customized platform strategy for you. And so that we can also then accelerate your writing success. So, this coaching does not look at how your book has been editing or things of that nature, but we are working on making sure you're guided in the correct path so that you can have that success that you've always dreamt of. So, I hope that you will click the button and sign up for a one on one. And I'd love to actually have you in our sessions. Of course, there's also a group coaching program if that will be more amenable to you. So sign up is limited, and I hope that I will see you in our new group. Thank you again for joining me, and I am Tina Glasnick, and it has been my pleasure. I hope to see you on the other side. Take care.